For Westerners at least, the bamboo curtain is much more difficult to penetrate than the Iron Curtain. Hong Kong, the British colony which clings like a button to the underbelly of mainland China, has come into its own as never before. Hong Kong is the great listening post for China. Through their receiving stations high up on the peak in Hong Kong, the world's news agencies monitor each and every broadcast. Finally, there are the silent watchers, the faceless ones, the intelligence agents, most of them employed by the British and the Americans. If Hong Kong is invaluable to the West as a listening post for China, it's just as useful to the Communist government of China. While China has been undergoing one of the most remarkable revolutions of its long and tumultuous history in the past few weeks, Hong Kong, the British colony which clings like a button to the underbelly of mainland China, has come into its own as never before. Here the China watchers, the experts on what is happening in communist China, have been having a field day. Never have they written so much, and never have they been in so much demand. Never has the rest of the world been so interested in what is happening in China. China is the most isolated and the least known big country in the world. For Westerners at least, the bamboo curtain is much more difficult to penetrate than the Iron Curtain. Because of its language, size and geography, China is much less get-atable than, say, Soviet Russia. At Lo Wu, the border crossing point between Hong Kong and China, the only official crossing point linking China with the Western world, incidentally, the eye comes up against the first slogan and the first barrage of quotations from the thoughts of Mao Zedong. The slogan reads predictably, "American imperialists and all counter-revolutionaries are paper tigers." All along the bank of the river, the thoughts of Mao stand watch like sentries, their faces turned towards Hong Kong. For Westerners, Mao's China is as cut off as was Stalin's Russia, despite the fact that tourists are allowed in along a well-beaten track. For the Chinese themselves, though, the bamboo curtain has plenty of loopholes. Since 1949, when the communists took over the government, about 20 million people have crossed in and out of China over the Lo Wu Bridge. Despite this enormous traffic, the British officials on the one side and the Chinese on the other never speak to one another. But however slender the rapport is at official level, this crossing point is one of the few roads into China and one of the even fewer means of finding out what is happening in China. Over this bridge come nearly all the diplomats, the businessmen, travelers, fellow travelers and tourists allowed into China, as well as the steady stream of Hong Kong Chinese who can go without much difficulty to visit their relatives in Canton. Right here at the border, the China watching begins. Chinese reporters from the Hong Kong papers interview travelers just back from China as they make the one-hour journey from the border into Hong Kong. An hour or two later, their stories are rolling off the presses. Hong Kong is the great listening post for China. Through their receiving stations high up on the peak in Hong Kong, the world's news agencies monitor each and every broadcast. Peking radio comes in loud and clear in Chinese and English, and the new China News Agency pours out a spate of words. Operators are trained to sift the mountain of propaganda for the nugget of news. When it comes, it's often a throwaway line at the end of a 20-page communiqué, or merely the fact that a once important name has been dropped from the official list of those present at some important parade or function. In such cases, omission often means oblivion and disgrace. At the other end of the line, down below in Hong Kong itself, the news is carefully listened to, translated into French or English, and transmitted to head offices thousands of miles away in Paris, London and New York. If Mao Zedong died or was toppled from power, the agencies would monitor it, translate it, and flash it round the world in 1 to 2 minutes. With their messages going direct to the White House, the Kremlin and number 10 Downing Street, as well as newspapers, radios and television stations, the agencies act as a kind of early warning system for major events inside Communist China. For the agencies, seconds count. But for China watchers like Richard Hughes, Far East correspondent of the Sunday Times, speed is less important than interpretation.
All pressmen now working in Peking are restricted. The Peking watcher, I really believe, if he is restricted to Peking, is not as informed as the Hong Kong watcher. I don't say this from sour grapes because I would like to go back there again if they'd let me. The ideal arrangement would be that you would have 6 months in Peking and then interchange with a representative of your paper 6 months in Hong Kong. If you stop there more than 6 months, you become embittered by the conditions and the claustrophobia and all the impositions on you. The Chinese communists are the most exquisite, impolite people in the world. They never reply to you if they say no, and they give you a curt advice if they say yes. They are the most impolite, boorish, un-Chinese Chinese you can imagine.
Mr. Hughes, what's your technique of China watching? How do you go about it?
What you do here is we get all the translations, which you don't get in Peking. We get translations from all sources. We get all newspapers. We get monitored accounts of all the radio stuff that goes out. We can see and talk to quietly, and after you've been here a while, trustingly, with refugees who are under examination by other people and who will tell you what's going on. You'll also find, if we are doing our job here properly, we also discover that you can continue to have very confidential, very tenuous, but all the more, for that reason, reliable and informative contacts with people who are living in embassies in Peking. These you protect when you report. On this, you must, of course, never diverge. And you will sometimes get a story, just one paragraph out of something that's come through the diplomatic bag, passed on to you, of no betrayal of the man who is reporting, which spills into another couple of paragraphs which you can put together and you've got a story.
One of the advantages to the Hong Kong China watcher is that he's really living in China. Hong Kong may be a British colony, but the population of 4 million is overwhelmingly Chinese. Hong Kong is Chinese in everything but name, and the steady flow of legal immigrants from China, up to 50 a day, plus another 100 a month who slip into the colony illegally, means that there is a constant flow of information about conditions on the mainland. Mark Gain, a Canadian who was born in China, is another China watcher who thinks that Hong Kong is the ideal place from which to do his job. Gain spent many years in China before settling in Hong Kong, where he's the correspondent for the Toronto Star. He reads and speaks Mandarin Chinese fluently and has had long talks with Mao and is rated one of the top China-watching journalists.
Yes, I met him in 47. I came to feel that he is the only great man that I'd ever met. A man almost overwhelming in his impact on you. It is true that while you talk to him, you discover tremendous gaps in his knowledge and his analysis, especially of the West. He simply could not know less than he knows about the West. But when he talked about China, when he talked about revolution, when he talked about the impact of revolution on a billion peasants in Asia, he was stupendous. He spoke at great length about his peasant revolution. And he was saying that he would not allow his revolution to suffer the fate that was suffered by other peasant revolutions in history, which started well, which had tremendous peasant support, but which, because they lost vigor, which, because they did not have competent leadership, allowed themselves to become soft and were, as a result, destroyed.
Is this what he's doing now with his own revolution?
I think that you cannot understand what Mao is saying or doing today without going back to his past. They had something like the Red Guards in 26, 27 in the villages. These were mostly youngsters who attacked the enemy, which was landlords or Chiang Kai-shek's people, the administration. And he is copying the methods, including even the dunce cap that they're using now. This is borrowed from 26. He has a tremendous nostalgia for the past. He sees all revolutionary virtue in that period, not in what is happening today.
Isn't he prejudicing now by doing this? China's future, isn't he sowing chaos?
Well, this is something else. I think that the great reality that he always keeps in his mind, and reality that I think the West ignores in trying to assess what is happening in China, that reality is 500 million peasants who do not live in the 20th century, but who live in the 17th.
If I may break in, yes. I mean, what has this got to do with what to an outsider might look like organized violence? Surely China ought to be modernizing and concentrating on economics rather than on propaganda.
Well, this is what I was going to explain. What Mao does not realize is that he has changed Chinese society. The fact is that every fifth Chinese today lives in the cities. He does not understand the cities. He does not understand the change that has taken place in society. He distrusts intellectuals. He's always distrusted them. And suddenly, perhaps in the mid-50s, in the late 50s, he realized that the world that was emerging in urban China was a world that he did not understand, he did not like, and a world that he felt was betraying his revolution. Here were young people who had not known the war, the Civil War, the Japanese War, who did not know the feel of barricades except by hearsay. They had forgotten the revolution. They were interested in education and getting a better job, in technical progress and so on. Here were intellectuals who had become divorced from this reality which is in the villages of China.
Isn't he holding them back rather than Stalin held back the Russians, would you say?
Well, what he is doing is he is saying to the cities, to the new urban China, you go back into the villages and you learn how to work with your hands, and you begin to educate the peasants instead of looking for new horizons in the cities. Now, it is true, as you say, it is true that he is delaying China's progress. It is impossible in the nuclear 60s to use the methods that were used in the 20s, the 30s. He is using almost primitive methods to deal with sophisticated problems. But then who is the one to say that he is wrong?
Do you think that Mao will come out on top in the long run?
This is one of the great issues that the questions that we keep debating in Hong Kong. Is he winning or is he losing? There are many people who claim that there is a stalemate, that Zhou Enlai is emerging as a great figure in China. My own feeling is that Mao Zedong and Marshal Lin Piao are winning. My own feeling is that opposition is impossible against the kind of methods that he is employing. My own feeling is that there has seldom been in history, in all history, a political tactician like Mao. Here in the fall of 1965, say 16, 17 months ago, he found himself in opposition to the party leaders, to the other party leaders. And he found that the only power base to which he was accustomed, which is the party machine, was not with him. He didn't have a power base. He was an individual. And then he proceeded very slowly, very carefully, methodically, to create a new power base. And first, of course, he won the army to his side through Marshal Lin Piao. Then he created the Red Guards. Then he started this much ridiculed movement of studying Mao's thought. Now, I know that in the United States, this is a subject of derision. But in fact, I see it as a tremendously shrewd political device. You're creating a climate in which no opposition is possible.
What do you think is going to happen after Mao Zedong?
When Mao dies, there will be a real struggle for succession. Today it's only incidental to this great debate on policy. When there is a struggle for succession, Lin Piao may be elbowed out. And who will come to power in this great struggle, I do not know. But it is very likely that the person who will come to power will feel that he is in the 60s or the 70s. And it is time to open the gates to the outside world, not to become friendly with the West, with the capitalists. This is not likely soon. But simply to benefit China by this constant contact with outside ideas.
Finally, there are the silent watchers, the faceless ones, the intelligence agents, most of them employed by the British and the Americans. The British watch comes under the aegis, if not the orders, of the governor, who rules Hong Kong in colonial splendor from Government House. The work is done in the more modern offices of the Government Secretariat, a few hundred yards away, and also in small dingy offices tucked away at the back of a building in less ostentatious parts of town. The Americans, on the other hand, do not have the advantage of a wide-cast civil service net. Their effort is concentrated in the American Consulate General. It's said to be the largest American consulate in the world and has a staff of several hundred Americans and Chinese. Behind these walls and windows, the American experts scan, check, analyze, and report back to Washington every aspect of affairs in China, from the latest atomic bomb test to the state of the harvest in Sichuan. If it's important enough, the information will be relayed to Washington within the day in code by radio. But the watching is not entirely one-sided. If Hong Kong is invaluable to the West as a listening post for China, it's just as useful to the Communist government of China. 3 buildings sum up the situation well. The Hong Kong Hilton is the biggest building in Hong Kong. Right next to it is the Communist Bank of China, and to the right of that, the Hong Kong Cricket Club, which is British, of course. Last year, communist businesses in Hong Kong netted Peking about £150 million in foreign exchange, sterling and dollars. China owns 5 banks in Hong Kong, scores of flats, 2 supermarkets, newspapers, a host of Susie Wong-type bars, and propaganda stores full of pictures of Mao Zedong and copies of his thoughts. China could push Hong Kong into the sea at any time. But if she were to do so, she'd be throwing away her lifebelt. and at the moment, Mao Zedong has enough troubles of his own at home.